SBC Media.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
There's winds of change happening across the gambling sector as Entain's troubled 2023 looks set to bring in new leadership and Brazil's ongoing sports betting bill gets stuck in limbo. These will be the two topics on today's episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Rio, where I, James Ross, am joined by Charlie Horner and Edward Menmuir for the first half of the show to talk about Entain. Then later on in the second half, Isadora Marcante, the business journalist from SBC Noticias, will replace Charlie and Edward to walk us through the latest update from the Brazilian Senate and the implications it could have moving forward. But first off, Charlie and Edward, this morning, Entain's CEO Jette Nygaard-Andersen has informed the company's board of directors of her wish to resign from the post with immediate effect. This comes off the back of a £585 million settlement Entain agreed with the UK's tax office, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, regarding proceedings relating to bribery suspicions. So first question to you both. What are your initial thoughts on Jette stepping down, and was this expected?
Yeah, hi James. Thanks for having us on. I would probably say that, this has been on the cards for some time, actually. There's been reports in the national press, namely in the Financial Times, really, that there's been growing pressure on leadership of Entain. Regarding their ongoing strategy for the last couple of years. Ted and I talked about it a few weeks ago on the podcast. We're struggling to see what Entain's strategy is. What's Entain's end goal? Is it to be bought out? Well, they've already declined offers from MGM and DraftKings, so that's seemingly off the table. They're pursuing this US opportunity with BetMGM, but then they've also been on this really costly M&A spree, buying these bolt-on European assets to bring into the group to really cement a number one position on the continent. But all of these things added together doesn't really add up to a cohesive plan. So there's been pressure building from investors in recent weeks and months, really, and it feels like this was always going to happen. And I think, this was always going to be on the cards when Entain published its financial results recently. It's Q3s where organic revenue had actually gone down by 5%. So, there's a clear muddling of the strategy here. But of course, we'll come on to touch on it in a moment, there's no reference to that in the statement. This is attributed to the HMRC settlement.
Yeah, look, I think if you put down the performance of Entain in 2023, on paper it's been a horrible year. So its share price to date has declined by 40 to 45%. Its corporate valuation is halved to $5 billion, and this is considering that this was a company that was targeted at $11 billion premium by MGM Resorts back in 2021. It suffered headwinds across Germany and the UK. And again, I think investors are seeking, or they're looking for answers as into what is the best outcome for Entain and what is its actual proposition and real value to the market.
So in my introduction, I mentioned the criminal proceedings relating to Entain and HMRC. Ted, can you just explain what these criminal proceedings were, just to go in a bit more detail, just for the audience?
The HMRC dispute on Turkish affairs, I think to put it simply, is kind of the final kind of black marker on Entain's year, in which the company settled an agreement with the High Court of the UK that it will pay £585 million to settle its bribery case and put it behind it. Also, it will pay $10 million in legal disputes and a further $20 million in charities. Now, this doesn't necessarily pertain to Entain as the company itself. It relates to the former exposure of its of GVC Holdings in Turkey, in which it operated a business called Headlong, and the HMRC kind of disputed the GVC Holdings activities in Turkey, in which it won its legal right to claim tax on their business activities. The fine itself is going to be spread over a 4-year period, so they're going to be paying back the £585 million fine in tranches of 4 segments. So that actually puts a lot more kind of bottom line pressure on their earnings with regards to their European arm.
Yeah, and like I said, she's stepped down after the conclusion of these proceedings. Why? What do you think it's an ideal scenario for her to step down now? Is it the right call? Is there more to this? Has she done a good job? Is she coming to it? Go on, Ted.
Okay, look, I think you've got to separate the HMRC case from Yetta resigning. I think that the CEO resigned due to the pressure that investors had on the board of Entain to fix and turn the company around. And Entain has so many hurdles to proceed with. In terms of what does it do with its European portfolio, which is now expanding to over 30 brands. It has entered a period of restructuring. The other thing here is that what is Entain's actual position in the US market? How does it compete against Flutter and DraftKings that are outpacing the market? And also kind of the review of, you had in an 18-month period, it's undertaken 9 acquisitions, and how have those been integrated? And is this a complete loss of control on leadership, where it's just gone after a kind of empire building strategy of just adding component after adding component? So there's so many questions of Entain's strategy to date, and where is the kind of cohesiveness for this company?
I think one of the main things that I would point out as an example here is the acquisition of Unicorn. So they spent millions and millions of pounds on this esports-based business, and they've closed it down. So it just gives you a glimpse of, what's going on, what's the thinking here? How do we integrate these new businesses into the wider Entain group? And, how are we strategically thinking about how to fit everything together? Because, as Ted alluded to, they've made a lot of acquisitions in the last 3 years under the leadership of Yetta. And, investors would say that they're yet to bear the fruit of that. And it comes into direct contrast with what investors would say should be the key priority, which is trying to establish a leadership position in the US, because that's what they see as the big opportunity.
Yeah, I think that perfectly leads into the next point I wanted to make. And Ted, you can comment on this in a second. There has been this kind of tug of war internally of what the company should focus on, either it's European, merger and acquisitions that they've been going through, or if it's the US with the BetMGM. Why have we seen this flurry of M&A activity throughout Europe instead of taking advantage of the US opportunity in front of them? Because in their Q3 earnings, even though you said they were down 5% on organic growth, they were up on online casino within the US. So why the focus on European and not the US?
All right. I think that you have to kind of reassess Entain's journey over the last 4 years. And it's also kind of relationship and its appeal to investors. Now, Entain, when PASPA was rebuilt, and especially from the period of 2022 to today, was kind of seen as a great vehicle in which a high-risk stock, right, that if you bet on it and the outcome comes right, this is an investment that might jump 5-fold and it provide a 5-fold return for investors. Now, the winds have changed. The winds have changed in the US. It's a much more difficult market in Europe, right? And I think that kind of reflects the problems with Entain. In terms of why did it continue with this, M&A activity, I think a lot of it is because that was in its playbook of we have to have, we have to continually double up our EBITDA, continue to double up our performance, really go to market and say, look, we are the company that is going to have a global online presence, that's going to have the best portfolio for Europe and the best portfolio for the US. Unfortunately, that strategy seems to have kind of caught up has kind of been exposed in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo what Ted said there. And, they are going for leadership positions in these markets. If you look at the businesses and the brands that they're buying in Europe, they're buying these gold standard brands like the STS Group in Poland, market leader, Supersport in Croatia. They're in they have a strong position in the market. It's just a case of, how far do you go with the BetMGM venture, given that it's a joint venture? They've got to share the profits ultimately with MGM. That relationship, we don't know what it's like behind closed doors. MGM have launched in the UK, BetMGM, but they've not gone with Entain. They've gone with Leo Vegas instead. But it's not to say that Entain haven't put resources into BetMGM. They absolutely have. I think that there was an investor update a couple of weeks back where the two parties together have put in over $1.2 billion into BetMGM over the last few years. It's growing. There's over $500 million of revenue growth each year over the last 3 years. But it's just a case of where does this venture go? Because ultimately, these joint ventures don't last forever. And I think investors want to know what's going to happen and how do they maximize value out of this lucrative business.
Okay, let's round this up and let's look forward to 2024. Following everything that's happened, yes, they're stepping down and the settlement. How does 2024 look for Entain moving forward?
From an Entain point of view, look, I'd be monitoring BetMGM closely. I think I will not be surprised if in the next 4 or 5 months, the board of MGM put a lowball offer to acquire the remainder of the BetMGM franchise. And especially as they'll be observing what is happening with their European exposure, how they're progressing on the strategic review, what are they willing to cut out. So I think one of the narratives next year for Entain, it's what gets chopped up, what gets put to market, how much are they going to price these assets at. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of kind of fire sale on European brands.
Yeah, from a US perspective, BetMGM is supposed to be profitable H2 this year, but leadership have come out and said that next year is going to be an investment year, so they're expecting losses to run into the hundreds of millions of dollars again. So I think it is just going to be a case of what do Entain do about this? How do they juggle the BetMGM venture with their European assets that we've talked about are swelling in numbers and we don't really know the future of. So there's a lot of question marks. I'd definitely say that.
Perfect, and hopefully some of those questions will be answered in the near future. And when they are, SBC News and SBC Americas will be all over it with Edward and Charlie. But that's it for the first half of the show. I just want to thank Edward and Charlie for joining us to talk about Entain. We're going to take a quick break now, and then afterwards, as promised in the introduction, we will have Isadora Marcante to talk more about the updates from Brazil.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
Isadora, thank you for joining us today. It's big news in Brazil. Well, it's a big update in Brazil. Even though we're kind of now in a state of limbo because it's going back and forth. But the Senate have made a decision. And can you just inform the listeners of what that decision actually is and the implications of this moving forward?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be very short on this because the discussion last night at the Senate was crazy and long. So actually what they did, the major thing here is that they removed from the text the online games part. So it was a big issue for them, like since last week. That was the reason why they asked to postpone the vote on the bill to be able to analyze if they wanted to keep online games or not. So they decided to remove the online games from the text. They approved the amendment presented at the Senate. So online casinos are not at the table for now, right? We have to wait and see what the Chamber of Deputies is going to do right now, because they have to vote on this new bill that was sent that's going to be sent by the Senate.
So why did the Senate disagree with online casino or online games being on the bill, while the Chamber of Deputies were in favour of it?
Yes, the Chamber of Deputies actually wrote this draft, including the online games. The problem is that we have a lot of conservative people in the Senate. They don't believe that legalizing and regulated online games will be beneficial for the population, because it can increase the addiction to games. It can increase the money loss. It can cause so many problems, like mental problems for the players, like they say. That is not good. And also, they had a fair point, I must say, last night, because online games are not illegal. Actually, like, we have a law that doesn't allow casino games to be to operate in Brazil, but they don't mention online casino games in this law. So it's a bit of like, it's not legal 100%, but it's also not illegal 100%. And they brought up this point last night, saying that we need to legalize it first before regulating it. So it has to be a different bill. We cannot do this right now. And the oppositors of this part of the text were like, if I'm not mistaken, was 37 votes or 47 votes against this part, against the online games. So yeah, it's a bit chaotic right now. I don't think operators are very happy with this.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's an interesting point saying like they'll have to legalize it first before actually regulating it. And it may be a slight encouragement for operators moving forward that there might be something a bit more specific for online casino further down the line. Once the sports betting side becomes regulated, they may then look into like legalizing online casino and putting more focus on that instead of just incorporating it into a bill, which has a predominantly sports betting focus. So it's maybe slight more encouragement than the doom and gloom that I originally thought about. But where does this leave Brazil moving forward? We've still got the sports betting bill. Obviously, the deputy chambers have to agree to the Senate's amendments, and then it'll go back to the Senate. The Senate will approve it. Then it goes to President Lula, and then Lula will decide to either veto it or approve it. Where are we at now? Because let's say online casino is off the table, because otherwise the deputy chambers will say no, we'll put it back on. Then the Senate will be like, nah, we're going to take it off, and there you are in purgatory, in limbo.
I know if we do that, it's going to be like an eternal looping. We're not going to like end this very soon.
The
like
longest tennis rally you've ever seen.
Exactly. No, right now, like, you'll go back to the Chamber of Deputies. I must mention that one good thing that we discussed last week about advertising on sports betting and famous people on promoting gambling. They approved the amendment, like the text that says that the sports betting sites can sponsor athletes, football clubs. They can promote their brand in the stadiums and in the shirts. So this is a very good thing. We should mention that, like, because last week we were talking about how dangerous could be that if we lose this kind of advertising. And right now, like, I think this is a good thing that they decided to keep on the text.
Yeah, but then let's move forward now. Let's say the deputy chambers will agree to these changes. The Senate will then agree to the changes, obviously, because they've requested them.
No, we don't have that anymore. Right now, thank God, no, because it's like this, like the Chamber of Deputies draft the bill. So it goes to the Senate for reviewing and editing and amending it if they want to. Like in this case, they did. So it goes back to the House who drafted the bill, which is the Chamber of Deputies. Right now, they will have the final vote. They will have the final word on this. They will just read everything and put on to vote. I know there are some specifications that they have to follow, some like rules for to do that. Otherwise, the whole senator's job would be in vain if they wanted to no, we're not going to accept anything that you just said. We're going to just follow what we wrote before. And then after that, it will go to Lula for signing straight. It doesn't go back to the Senate anymore. So apparently they want to do this year.
Okay.
They want to approve everything. They have to approve in the Chamber of Deputies and send it to Lula for signing. Not sure though if Lula will sign this year, because we are on the 13th December. I think the Chamber of Deputies, they need to maybe be a bit quicker and do things very, very fast to be able to send to Lula, because it's 15 working days to vote. Lula has this time to vote. So vote on the bill. So maybe the Chamber of Deputies will move forward with this, we'll forward it to Lula this year. Not sure if Lula will sign this year, but hopefully. Things are moving fast, I must say.
Yeah, faster than I thought. And we'll keep on top of it on iGaming Daily and SBC Noticias Brazil. You'll keep on top of this as it breaks and when. Isa, thank you for joining us to just talk over the latest update. You're going to be going on annual leave now, so have a good time off. And we probably won't hear from you now until the new year. So I'm pretty sure every listener of iGaming Daily is wishing you a happy Christmas or a Merry Christmas.
Miss me, I know.
Happy New Year and have a great time off.
SBC Media.